When you picture ancient Egypt, what comes to mind? Probably huge statues of massive, powerful men, right? Pharaohs, pyramids, things that have blown our minds for centuries. But that whole grand history, it was built by more than just kings, which leads to a really big question.
Okay, we all know Cleopatra. But here's the thing, she wasn't some one-off. She was actually the grand finale, the end product of this long, incredible line of powerful women who were shaping the empire for literally thousands of years. So let's pull back the curtain on this hidden history. To really get the power of Egyptian women, you have to go all the way back to their creation story. And right at the center of it is the goddess Isis. Now, unlike in a lot of other ancient cultures, she was the hero of the story, the active, dominant one. When her husband Osiris gets killed, it's Isis whose magic is powerful enough to bring him back from the dead. This story, with a female deity as the prime mover, gave women in Egypt a kind of status that was just unheard of anywhere else in the ancient world.
So, that divine power, how did it show up in the real world? Well, it all started with the power of the royal mother. Let's meet our first trailblazer, Queen Hetepheres. We're talking over 4,500 years ago. The secret to her power? It's all about location, location, location. Get this, before the Great Pyramids were even a blueprint, this exact spot was chosen for her. Her son, the Pharaoh Khufu, was convinced he needed his mother's life-giving power to be reborn in the afterlife. So he buried her here first. She became the spiritual anchor, the starting point for the entire Giza necropolis, that huge city of the dead. And her tomb, which is the oldest intact royal burial ever found, by the way, was just stuffed with unbelievable treasures that tell you exactly how important she was. I mean, we're talking about a golden flat-pack bedroom suite, a gilded chair so she could be carried everywhere without her feet touching the ground, and these amazing silver bangles, each one made a slightly different size to fit her arm perfectly. But she was so much more than just rich. The hieroglyphs on her chair give us her official titles, including this absolute mic drop of a phrase, she whose every command is carried out. So yeah, her power came from being the king's mother, but make no mistake, she was a major authority in her own right.
Hetepheres was the power behind the throne. But about 1,000 years later, one woman looked at that and thought, nope, not enough. She didn't just want to influence the king, she wanted to be the king. Her name was Hatshepsut, and she basically threw out the rulebook and wrote a new one.
That quote, that was Hatshepsut's whole vibe. See, when her husband died, the next pharaoh in line was just a kid. So she stepped in, first as regent, but then she just went for it and had herself crowned king. And to hold onto that power, she became an absolute master of propaganda.
And this is where she was just so brilliant. In a time when almost nobody could read, what you saw was everything. So Hatshepsut just adopted all the classic imagery of a male pharaoh. She put on the right crown, the kilt, and yep, even the divine false beard. The message couldn't be clearer. If you look like a pharaoh, you are a pharaoh. And she wasn't just playing the part. Her reign was a massive success. She was an incredible builder, giving us some of Egypt's most beautiful temples. She was a warrior queen who literally led her armies into battle herself. And she was an economic powerhouse, reopening old trade routes that brought tons of wealth, like priceless myrrh, flooding back into Egypt. She proved, without a shadow of a doubt, that a woman could be one of the greatest leaders Egypt ever had. So, Hatshepsut wielded power like a hammer, direct and forceful. But our next queen shows us a totally different playbook. This is about the subtle, smart art of soft power and diplomacy. Meet Nefertari. Nefertari was married to Ramesses II. Ramesses the Great, one of the most famous and, let's be honest, boastful pharaohs in history. It would have been so easy to be overshadowed by a guy like that, but she was a critical partner in his rule, and she carved out her own incredible sphere of influence. You can literally see this partnership carved in stone at Abu Simbel. Ramesses built a gigantic temple to himself, of course, but right next door he built another one, just as big, dedicated only to Nefertari. And here's the best part. If you look closely at her statues, thanks to that tall, feathered crown, she stands just a little bit taller than her husband. That's a huge public statement of just how much he valued her. But it wasn't just about being a pretty face. Deep inside her mind-blowingly beautiful tomb, there's a scene of her with Thoth, the god of knowledge, and the inscription has her declaring, "I am a scribe." Think about that. At a time when being able to read and write was a rare elite skill, she wanted it known for all eternity that she wasn't just a queen, she was an intellectual. And she put that big brain of hers to work on the world stage. We have these amazing clay tablets that show her writing directly to the queen of the rival Hittite empire. She calls her sister, sends her gifts of gold and fine linen, and uses this personal woman-to-woman connection to help build and keep the peace between these two massive superpowers. That is soft power at its most effective.
Okay, so we've seen the powerful mother, the king in her own right, and the master diplomat. Our final queen, Arsenea II, basically took all of those models, threw them in a blender, and created something totally new, a truly global queen.
Arsinoe's time was after Alexander the Great, when Egypt was really opening up to the rest of the world. And she was a genius at balancing two different worlds. She honored the ancient traditions of Egypt while totally embracing her Greek heritage, using her international connections to bring a level of wealth and knowledge into Egypt that was just unprecedented.
She was a financial whiz. On her statues, she's not holding one horn of plenty, a cornucopia, she's holding two. It was a visual promise that she was going to bring double the prosperity to the kingdom. She helped create a modern bureaucracy and really pushed Egypt out of a simple barter system and into a modern economy based on coinage.
But what's so cool about Arsinoe is that she knew her history. She was deeply aware of the women who came before her, and she paid tribute to them in the most public way you can imagine, through her crown. This thing wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a carefully crafted story of female power.
Let's break this down, because it's like a history lesson on her head. The sun disk right in the middle, that's a callback to the Pyramid Age, to the mother of the nation, Pharaohs. The twisted ram's horns, that's a symbol of the god Amun-Ra, a direct link to the pharaoh king Hatshepsut. And the tall feathers and cow's horns, that's a direct shout-out to the great royal wife Nefertari. She was literally wearing the legacy of these incredible women, claiming all of their power as her own.
So you see, this wasn't just a random series of amazing individuals. When you look at it all together, you see what it really is. A multi-generational chain of power, where each woman built on the legacy of the ones who came before. From the foundational power of a mother, to the absolute rule of a female pharaoh, from the smart diplomacy of a royal wife, to the economic genius of a globalist queen. Together, these women created a blueprint for female leadership. And it was this powerful, centuries-long legacy that shaped ancient Egypt and ultimately gave us its most famous queen of all. Understanding this hidden half of Egypt's history completely changes how we see their whole civilization. And it leaves us with one last, pretty big thought. What other powerful figures, whose stories have just been overlooked or forgotten, are out there waiting for us to rediscover them?